Welcome back to Motors and Medicine. On today's episode, I'm outside. I'm going to be doing a video on Mustangs. I'm going to start at the beginning, and then I'm going to end with a discussion on the 24 Mustang that just got released. But first, before I get started, I just wanted to fill you guys in on a little goal I have. To this point, the channel has grown pretty decent, pretty steadily. I have now 315 subscribers. And my goal is to get to 500 before the end of the year. So hopefully that's something that's totally doable. I think we can do it. I'm just asking all of you guys as a favor, just tell all your friends, whoever might be interested in a channel like this, and see if they'll be interested in subscribing and liking and help the channel grow. Yeah, I appreciate all of you guys' support. And without further delay, we'll get into the video. So today I'm going to talk about Mustang. And Mustang is kind of an iconic pony car that's been around since 1964. Realistically, 1964 and a half. It was released in April of 1964. And it was taken to the World Trade Fair back in 64, and it looked like this. Now, this Mustang was basically a craze. It was the brainchild of Lee Iacocca, and he originally thought it'd be a nice change of pace. They took the chassis of the Ford Falcon and just modified it a little bit to make it into a more sporty car called the Mustang. Now, the Mustang, for whatever reason, some people thought it would be a secretary's car, including Iacocca, until they had an idea to maybe have somebody who had racing pedigree that could maybe take the car, modify it. And that person is Carroll Shelby, race car driver, designer, builder. Everybody knows who Shelby is. So Lee Iacocca worked with Shelby. They took the Mustang in 65 and they turned it into a even sportier hot rod. And really, the Mustang is the first car that sparked the pony car craze. And that was the first car that kind of made it affordable for the average guy to get a smaller, lighter muscle car that was more affordable than Corvette at the time. So that was a huge thing. In fact, in that first year, they sold well over 1 million Mustangs of 1965. Well over 1 million, which is unheard of by today's standards. Today's standards, an average Mustang model year sells maybe 100,000, if that. Maybe a little bit more, but for the most part, it's nothing close to what was being sold back in the 60s. So that's just a little bit of information about the Mustang. Now, I was fortunate enough to own and build a 65 Mustang. I bought a Mustang back in 2006, and I bought it from the second owner who lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that car had been pretty well taken care of, but it was in rough shape. The engine didn't run very well. The transmission, chassis, everything was kind of just old and worn out. Nothing had been replaced. That particular second owner had bought it from the original owner who lived in California. The car was a San Jose, California car, and the second owner bought it from that guy. Each owner owned it for about, well, the original owner bought it in 65. The second owner I bought it from in 2006, so then I became the third owner. And I owned that car from 2006 until, I sold it in 2018. Now, I'm going to show you guys a couple of pictures of this car, what it looked like. I don't have any pre-modification and restoration pictures, but I can say this, that when I bought the car, it was a really poorly painted Rangoon red 65 Mustang, and it had a 289 two-barrel. It was a C code, and it had just a beat-up interior, beat-up carpet. The engine just leaked oil. It didn't run very well. Everything was old and hadn't been replaced. It had wire wheels that were original from 65. And they were super skinny, literally like the size of motorcycle tires. So that'll give you an indication of what the car looked like. Now, this is what the car ended up looking like after I restored it myself. I took several years to build it in my garage, restore it. I did all the work except for the paint, but everything else I did, including I rebuilt the transmission and I dropped in. I went through several different engines, but the final engine was a crate engine from Ford. It was a racing engine, and I attached a. The transmission was a Tremec TKO 600, and the rear end was a 9-inch nodular limited slip differential. So the car ran exceptionally well. I was really impressed with the performance of it, and sad that I had to sell it, but I'd had it long enough. So this is what that car looked like. Now, after I sold that car, I really got interested in moving on to something a little bit more modern. And actually, that I got to make a correction. I sold that car in 20, I want to say 2017. But before that, I had actually bought another Mustang, and I kind of owned the two cars at the same time. The other Mustang I bought was a 2011 GT500 Shelby, and I really liked that car. That car was a very unique car. It had a very unique paint scheme. It was grabber blue with red racing stripes, and you just didn't see that kind of color combination. In fact, when I bought it from a dealership out in Texas, and it only had like 1,000 miles on it, so it was pretty much brand new. And the car was just phenomenal. I modified it a little bit. It came with a supercharged engine, obviously, because it was a Shelby GT500. It made 550 horsepower. I modified it to 650 horsepower, and it was a 6-speed manual. Had lots of fun with it. But the car had a live axle rear end, and it just really made it difficult to take corners really fast, especially if you went over a bump. And anybody who's owned a live axle modern Mustang knows exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, once I left work, hit about 70 miles an hour on an on-ramp, hit a bump, and the car went sideways. And it took a lot of effort to try to get the car back under control. So I realized then that it was just not really going to be a car that was intended for corner carving, but more like just straight line performance. So I had that car for a few years, and then I sold that car so that I could use the money as a down payment on my new house. And this is what that car looked like. So now that you guys have seen that car, now that kind of brings me up to 2018. And in 2018, I sold my 2017, I sold my 65. And then in early 2018, I bought the car that you see behind me now. This is my 2018 Mustang GT. And I've done a video on what this car is, but I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of go over briefly what I've done to the car, and show you guys just a couple of mods that I did. And then I'm going to talk about why I feel that this car, this platform, this chassis, which is called the S550, in my opinion, is probably the most perfected Mustang ever built and sold. And I, of course, did a lot of things to this car to make it what it is. And I'm going to go into just a few things that I did. After that, I'm going to hop in the car. We're going to go for a little ride, and we're going to talk about the 24 Mustang, and then to kind of discuss the similarities between that generation and the S550 generation that you see behind me. And I'm just going to give you my opinion on that new car, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to pause the video for a second, get the camera reoriented, and then we'll talk about my car just a little bit before we hop in. So as you guys can see, this is my 2018 Mustang. Some of the things that I did to this car, we'll start on the outside. Obviously, it sits lower than your average Mustang. I had a full Steeda suspension put on this car. I ordered the car brand new in 2018 and ordered it with the performance pack so that I could get the better suspension and brakes and cooling and things like that. I, of course, took it to the next level. Put a full Steeda suspension on it, K-member brace in front, Steeda stop the hop kit in the back, subframe connectors, axles, wider wheels and tires. The car sports 275s in front, 305s in the back. And I mean, it's a considerably different car. It has a lot of aero that I added to it. We'll start up at the front, and I'll just kind of go over that real quick. And like I said, I've covered this in a previous video, but I'm just going to cover it quickly now. So, you know, I had some canards added to the front, above, right below the fog lights, and then I believe it's a Race Logic front splitter. And then I added carbon fiber in numerous places. The front grille, the top more vents. The wheels are RTR Tech 5s. Added some more aerodynamic stability aero pieces on the side skirts, just to help channel air a little bit better. You know, carbon fiber on the rear view mirrors. Of course, the carbon fiber rear spoiler, carbon fiber rear deck lid panel, and then here in the back, the Roush rear diffuser. This car, when I bought it, came with active exhaust, and it still has that. The only thing I did in the exhaust to modify was I changed out the mid pipe. I had an X pipe for a while, and that was too loud and raspy, so I changed to an H pipe, and that just gave it the perfect balance. Real quick, we'll look inside the interior. Obviously, you can see there's quite a bit of carbon fiber in here as well, including the steering wheel and the shifter paddles. There's carbon fiber on the dash and on the center console there. Added a different shift knob. And then, as you guys saw in a recent video, I actually added a rear seat delete, which you can see there. Now, real quick, I'm gonna open the hood and show you guys under the hood. And then, as you know, I had added hood struts to this particular vehicle, which made it a lot cooler for keeping the hood open. The big attraction here under the hood is the Whipple supercharger. This is a Gen 5 3-liter Whipple supercharger. And of course, this engine is not the stock original engine. This engine is a Gen 3 illuminator that I bought to put in here to withstand all the extra power. Now, the stock engine is plenty strong, but I was going to go up a little bit more in boost, and I wanted to make sure that this engine could handle it. So this Gen 3 illuminator has all forged internals, crank rods, pistons, the whole works. And it has billet oil pump gears. This Whipple has the 132 millimeter throttle body, and I'm running a 375 pulley. It has been custom tuned by Premier Performance here locally. Shout out to them. They did a fantastic job. The car makes 900 horsepower at the crank, which was about 780 at the wheels. You can see here I had a cool plaque made by Precision Auto Works. And I think it's Precision Pixel Works is I think what's what the company that makes this plaque. Anyway, I've done a video on that already. So this was just a quick video. You can kind of see carbon fiber that I added under the hood. But this was just to kind of give you an impression of what this car looks like, because on the drive, I'm going to get into talking about the 24 Mustang, what it looks like under the hood, the interior, from the front, the back, the side, and we'll just kind of compare the two and go from there. So go ahead and take another quick pause, and then we'll get set up in the car. All right, so now we're in the car, got everything set up. I'm going to just quickly discuss the 24 Mustang appearance, show you a few pictures of the car from the front, the side, the back, the interior, and under the hood. And then once I show you that, then we're going to take off for a drive and discuss the differences between that car and this car, the similarities, what I like about my car versus that car. There's a few things that are pretty attractive about that new car, but we'll get into that and we'll talk about it. So I'm going to show you that car right now. This is what it looks like. All right, now we're going to go ahead and fire this car up and go for a little drive. So I'm going to grab my sunglasses. It's still sunny and nice out here, so I apologize. This car is fairly loud, especially now because I have a rear seat delete. And so I didn't realize how much sound deadening the rear seats provided, especially with that loud exhaust I have. The reality is that it's so loud now, sometimes when I drive it, I have to put the exhaust in quiet. But we're going to leave it loud now for the video, just because. So all right, and you know, I love the way this car sounds. I never even turn on the radio because I just love to listen to the exhaust. So now while we're taking this drive, I'm just going to discuss, you know, this 24 Mustang. It's gotten a lot of controversy on the internet. There's a lot of people, a lot of shops that have, you know, started modifying it already, trying to learn all they can about it, testing it on the dyno and all this. And it kind of seems a little disappointing because the consensus has been that this new 24 Mustang, first of all, was maybe a little bit rushed. There's been some fit and finish quality issues that have been reported. Secondly, the car actually weighs more. It's near 4,100 pounds. So it weighs more than the outgoing Mustang. And just for perspective, my Mustang, which is a premium with all the bells and whistles, leather, the whole thing, weighs, with the weight reduction that I've done to it to this point, which, I mean, it's not super fair, but with the weight reduction I've done, this car weighs about 3,830 pounds. So not bad. But the new Mustang is weighing in like near 4,100 pounds, which is really heavy. And one of the reasons for that is because that new Mustang, they decided to add a whole bunch of technology and go away from traditional appearance in the dash compartment. So most Mustangs, dating back all the way to 65, like I explained a second ago, all had the double brow on the dash with gauges in the center. And of course, newer, more modern Mustangs had, you know, the touch screen in the middle and then a small digital gauge, unless you got the digital gauge cluster all the way across on the left side. When I ordered this car, I had the opportunity to order the digital gauge cluster, but I chose not to because my opinion is that, first of all, I like the old school look of the analog gauges. That's just simple. Second, there had been some reports of the digital gauge cluster having issues when it first came out back in 2018. In some cars, people would be driving and all of a sudden the whole thing would black out and they wouldn't know how fast they were going or what the car was doing, which, you know, it's not ideal. And I just didn't want those glitches from a newly introduced technology. So I opted for the traditional analog gauges, and I'm glad I did because I just like that look better. Now, mine had the nicer, larger center screen, and it had all the bells and whistles, you know, the CarPlay, all that stuff, navigation, which I never really use because, like I said, I pretty much just drive this car to listen to the engine and the exhaust and go fast, and that's it. And that brings me to my next point, that when Ford was designing the 24 Mustang, I understand based on my research that they developed the Mustang with the aid of a lot of millennials and Gen Zers for how the car should look internally. And I think because of that, they decided to introduce a whole lot of technology that perhaps in some cars is warranted and appreciated. But in my opinion, if you're going to be buying a Mustang, which is a performance car to go fast and be loud, it seems a little counterintuitive to put a whole bunch of technology and screens, Tesla-sized screens all across the Mustang. And as you saw in those photos that I showed you, those screens are enormous, and they kind of take away from the traditional look of the Mustang. They also take away from just, it's almost like a distraction. I can't imagine sitting in that car and trying to focus on the road when I've got all those screens in front of me. Personally, I just don't like that new car interior at all. A lot of people like it. A lot of people like the tech, and that's fine. You know, to each their own. But my opinion of the car is that internally, or interiorly speaking, I just can't stand those screens. I can't stand any of that tech. I think it just takes away from the essence of Mustang, in my opinion. The next thing is the appearance on the outside. So the Mustang, it has very similar silhouette and look to the S550, and the new Mustang is designated the S650. And so from a silhouette standpoint, if you put the cars next to each other, they're fairly similar. In fact, there's not enough of a departure from the S550 to even really warrant wanting to buy the new one, unless you're just wanting a new car, to be honest. Because the S550, in my opinion, as far as designs go, was just perfection. Interior, exterior, performance, everything was just really top-notch with that car. The S650, the side profile is pretty nice. I'll give it that. The front is a little bit, perhaps maybe a little bit more aggressive than on the S550, but I can't stand the rear end of the car. As I showed you in the pictures, the rear end of the car has like this ridiculously large plastic cladding, almost like a rear valance. It's just not an attractive piece. And unless you buy a performance pack, you're gonna get stuck with single exit exhaust, which, why? I mean, Ford kind of took a step back on that one, because when the S550 was released, at least in 2018, that is, they offered dual or quad tip exhaust for all the cars, and only the performance pack got the active exhaust, which was a little bit higher flowing and made about 5 more horsepower, whatever it was. I don't know what it was, but it definitely sounded better. And on this car, on the new Mustang GT, if you just buy a standard GT, you're going to get a single exit exhaust, which just looks retarded. It just doesn't have that you know, that appeal, that appearance of the quad tip exhaust coming out the back. Next, you have the controversy behind what these cars have been putting down on the dyno. And several shops have tested the cars, and it looks like even the higher performance variant right now, the Dark Horse, what they call it, is putting down about 430, 440 horsepower. The reality is that when the S550 came out, most of those cars on dynos were putting down between 420 and 440. And they were rated at 460 horsepower. So what's going on? Either the S550 was underrated, which is what most people think, or these new cars are just, you know, not as good as they're advertised. The reality is that because the weight went up by so much, I mean, from 3,800 pounds or even less, all the way to nearly 4,100 pounds, they didn't seem to add quite enough horsepower to compensate for that weight. So that's kind of a downer for me. And it makes me realize I definitely don't have an interest in taking a car like that, especially if you kept it naturally aspirated. And that brings me to my next point, and that is that this new Mustang, the S650, has a locked computer. You can't tune it. And my car, the 2018, from when this car was released, the S550 was released in 2015, and then when they revamped it in 2018. But every one of those years from when it was released, every year of those cars, and every sub-variant model like the Mach 1, the GT350, the GT500, all of them were tunable right from the get-go. You could literally get in, have a custom tune placed, increase the boost if you had a supercharger on it already, or add a supercharger and put whatever tune you want. You could do that from the gate, from out the gate. This new S650, unfortunately, is locked to the hilt. Can't tune it. And right now, the only tuning company that's even been allowed to do any modification to the car is Whipple, which I love Whipple. I have a Whipple on my car. But Whipple did another thing that was kind of weird, and their Whipple design for the supercharger is this wonky looking double intake, because the new car, as you saw in the photos, has twin air intakes. We're going to talk about that here in a sec, but the Whipple just doesn't look as attractive as it did before. You guys just saw what I showed you under my hood. That's like a very classic Whipple look. And now this new look, having two intake boxes, it just looks a little weird. Now, some people will say, well, hey, a lot of modern cars come with twin intakes, so why all the fuss with this new Mustang? Well, here's the issue with that, is that other cars that utilize that twin air intake system have two separate plenums. In other words, like it's almost like two separate plenums in an intake manifold that are separated, so that each bank gets its own throttle body and control and airflow. This new S650 Mustang, it's twin throttle bodies, but it's all going into one plenum and one intake manifold, which is just really weird. And the consensus on that is that Ford is just trying to please the government and the stupid EPA and all their crackdowns on emissions. So literally the car has two air boxes, two mass air meters to measure air coming in, two throttle bodies, which is just going to complicate things so much, because now you have two mass air meters, two throttle bodies. And from what I've understood, it seems that the possibility with this new air intake system is that there's going to be a primary throttle body that opens for most driving, and then when you go wide open, the second throttle body will probably open, something like that. Because why would you have two going into the same intake manifold? It just makes no sense. From an engineering standpoint, it makes no sense. Now, getting back to the appearance of the engine with the dual throttle bodies. The engine has a mass air sensor on each box, but then it was discovered that behind the intake manifold there's a map sensor. Now everybody knows, who knows cars, a map sensor is speed density air metering, which is what the supercharged GT500 has, and that makes it to where you don't need any tune if you change the air intakes. You can change the air intake on a GT500, and the map sensor is just going to sense that extra air and adjust the fueling accordingly. But with a car, traditionally the S550 had a mass air, which means that if you're going to change the intake on it, you have to do a tune to maximize those performances, or the car will actually suffer. And so that just seems weird to me that people Ford would put two mass air meters and then a map sensor on the back. It just all leads to the same conclusion, that Ford is just being strangleholded by the government on this EPA emissions, and they're just trying to keep the fuel control so tight that they won't allow any tuning or even changing of the air intakes, because the system's not going to allow for it. And of course there's no tuning, right? Now the next problem with this new engine is the fact that installed in the air intake tracks are these ridiculous carbon filter traps or something. Supposedly, the engineers at Ford were, I'm sure, talked into this by, all the regulators, that when the car is running, when you shut it off, some fumes can escape through the air intake system. So now they put these stupid carbon traps, which are nothing but airflow restrictors in the air intake. I'm just like dumbfounded by how ridiculous Ford is getting with like their designs. So it's funny that they touted this new engine as, more powerful at 480 for the GT and 500 for the Dark Horse, and yet they're putting down, even the Dark Horse is putting down power that the outgoing S550 was putting down relatively stock form. So I think Ford just missed out on an opportunity there to just be themselves and not let the government tell them how to do things and how to build cars. Sadly, that Gen 4 Coyote engine is just, in my opinion, underwhelming. It's just not the best engine. I don't know if it's got forged internals or not. I think it's got a crank and maybe better rods, but point is that you're only going to be able to do a Whipple on it, and the tuning is only going to be allowed from Whipple. So it's going to be ultra conservative. That car might make 700 at the crank. It's just not going to make much more power than that. And who knows if they'll ever allow people to unlock it. It's possible that they will, but with the track record that Ford had in the past, all the other previous Mustang generations could be tuned right from the get-go. You could go buy a car off the lot and go put a supercharger on it and tune it with a custom tune right away. And that's not the case anymore, which is sad. Now, I'm going to just try to focus on some of the positive of this new car. Obviously, I'm not thrilled about the back end, like I mentioned. Side profile's okay, front profile's okay. The engine looks weird with that dual system because it's got one plenum and not two separate plenums. They should have taken a lesson out of GM's book and seen what they did with the new Corvette Z06. It's got dual plenum and dual throttle bodies, but it has dual plenums. That's when dual throttle bodies make sense. But anyway, the interior, of course, I can't stand. But let's focus on the things that I do like about it. Well, the interior, aside from the dash, is pretty attractive. The seats are nice. The quality and the materials are better than they were in the S550, which is pretty good. Because, I had to upgrade my S550 interior a lot to step it up. Now, the S550 was a huge upgrade over the S197. The S197 Mustang just looked terrible. And I know because I owned an S197, a GT500, a 2011 that I showed you. And that interior, the seats were nice, but everything else was just hard plastic. It was just ugly. The S550 stepped that up a lot. The interior had soft touch just about everywhere, nice leather coverings. But this new S650 has even better than that. So I'm impressed with that. I can't stand the screens, like I mentioned, but I'm impressed with everything else. Transmissions are about the same. The Dark Horse does have the better Tremec transmission, but unfortunately the GT still, and the GT Premium or Performance Pack still come with that MT82, which I don't know if Ford made any improvements there, but when I bought my Mustang back in 2018, I steered away from that MT82 for two reasons. One, that MT82 in 2018 was like made out of glass. It was just breaking shift forks like no other. And besides that, I always had this vision in my head that I wanted to build a fast roll racer. And for that, I wanted the 10R80 automatic transmission, which is why I chose that. Now, other things that I like about the car, it seems that they kind of went back to a little bit of an old school look on the hood. With, it's got a little bit of a cowl hood appearance, but also it has very similar or reminiscent hood vent to the GT500 of 2007 through 2009, which I always liked. So I kind of thought that was cool that they brought that back. The rear wing is pretty nice. And like I said, the side profile looks good. So those are my positives. Most of the interior, aside from the dash, the hood, front end is pretty good. Side profile's okay. Wing is okay. But the rear end, terrible with that plastic cladding. And with the single exit exhaust, I'm sorry, but that just kind of went backwards. That was a loss by Ford right there. They should have just kept it quad exhaust for everything across the board. And you know, that pretty much sums up the S650. I think unfortunately Ford missed the mark overall, because they introduced this car that just, you know, they put a lot of hype around it, right? They introduced this car that has all this tech, which most people who are into Mustangs are just not into. Second, they introduced things like the key fob that can rev the car. Who cares? And then the drift brake. Honestly, who on earth is going to use the drift brake? Nobody. Some people might try it and then they're going to wreck their car. Like, I understand, you know, they had Von Gittin Jr. help them design it, but, and I have mad respect for Von Gittin Jr., but at the end of the day, this drift brake thing, I think it's just a gimmick. So, sadly, there's a lot of things about the car that are just shortcomings and downfalls. Hopefully Ford learns from all the negative press the car's been getting, and they just turn it up a notch for 2025. So that's the end of that. Now I'm just going to give you guys a quick little pull with this car so you guys can hear it under wide open throttle, because I hadn't done that when I did the review last time. So here we go. Hold on. Woo! That is amazing and fast. I'm not going to tell you how fast I got on that, because it's very fast, but that was fun. Now we're going to head back to the house, and finish up this video. So, like I was saying, you know, I really think that the S550, in my opinion, was just Mustang perfection. I don't think that they could have built a better car. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope that Ford does better with future models of this S650, like the forthcoming Cobra and GT500 and whatever else they decide to make. But I still find it really hard to justify spending more money for a heavier car that's slower and that doesn't have quite the looks that it should have, considering what it is. And all that tech crap is just going to be a distraction for most people. I mean, unless you're a millennial or a Gen Zer who just wants to look at screens all the time and not care so much about performance. But I think, you know, those are ultimately the downfalls of the S650. My hope is that one other thing that Ford could have done, you know, that I think is just a missed opportunity, is that I was kind of hoping that Ford would have had an answer for Chevy and their mid-engine C8. Now, I'm enamored with that C8. I've driven one. I tested one for the channel. It's a fun car to drive. And I've actually considered in the future maybe picking up a Corvette C8 E-Ray, just because it's such a fast car. It's all-wheel drive, can be driven all year long, and it's just wicked fast. But my hope was that Ford would have built maybe a, you know, if not a mid-engine Mustang, and made it affordable to compete with Corvette, just like Mustang did back in the 60s. You know, they built this pony car, muscle car to allow the average guy, the average Joe, to buy a car that was fast and high performing, but, you know, the average guy could afford the car. It wasn't the cost of a Corvette. You could save, you know, quite a bit of money and just buy a Mustang back then. So my hope is that maybe Ford will introduce a Mustang that is, if not mid-engine, at least, you know, maybe something lighter, like and I wouldn't even care if they put, like, say, a 3.5 liter twin turbo EcoBoost and then put an electric motor in the front so you had all-wheel drive. 600 plus horsepower Mustang, that thing would be lightning fast. It'd be a rocket with all that all-wheel drive traction. So who knows? I mean, I'm hoping Ford can do some things, because I'm a big-time Mustang guy. I've always been, as I showed you all those pictures of former Mustangs that I've owned and the things that I've done with them. It's been a great time having Mustangs. I really like Mustang. I think it's like one of the most incredible platforms for modification, and you can have a Mustang that looks good, sounds good, and performs just as good as just about any car out there on the market right now. So hopefully this video kind of opens your eyes to what Mustangs were, how they evolved, and where they wound up today with the 24 Mustang. And you guys have your own opinions on the 24. Don't know what's going to come of the future with future models, but hopefully this gave you some pretty cool information. If you guys like the video, please slam that subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends about the channel. Let's get it to grow. Let's get to 500 subs before the end of the year. And I'll see you guys on the next video. We're going to probably get back into something with medicine, and we'll go from there. So until then, this is Motors and Medicine signing off. Thank you guys for all your support. Have a good one.